Hi, I'm David Beard. Welcome to Good Vibrations, a Beach Boys program, episode 5. This is just going to be a one-part episode today. And in this episode, I'm talking to lead singer Mike Love, mostly about his induction into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. That'll be in June of this year in New York. Now, our Zoom went on for 49 minutes. You're going to get a piece of that in today's episode. The other part of the interview is in the pages of the summer edition of Endless Summer Quarterly, which will be available soon. And some of the content in this episode is only going to be exclusively in this episode that is not in print in ESQ. Now you're going to notice a lot of photos are used in this particular episode. And the reason for that is Mike and I did our Zoom on a Saturday. It was a day of a show. And it was late afternoon, probably around 4 o'clock or so, is when the Beach Boys recently did their Canadian tour. So Mike, during our conversation, a lot of times was resting his eyes, kind of preserving his energy for that evening's performance. It's for that reason that I kind of went in and used a bunch of photos that were applicable to our conversation. All right, let's get started. I hope you enjoy.
Hi, this is Wendy Wilson here, and I am telling you to subscribe to the Endless Summer Quarterly magazine. It is full of history and photos and rare interviews that you will not find anywhere else. So please check it out and know that David Beard does an amazing job covering the history of the Beach Boys. And I think you're really going to like it. So check it out. Take care. Subscribe to ESQ.
So the Beach Boys received their Lifetime Achievement Award from the Grammys in 2001. You received the prestigious Ella Award in 2013. As a member of the Beach Boys, what award stands out to you?
Well, I think the upcoming Songwriters Hall of Fame is probably the most significant award that I've achieved because, I did in fact write so many lyrics to Brian's songs, and they were so successful. Unfortunately, early on in our career, we fired Uncle Murry, Brian Dennis Carl's dad, from being our manager, and to get even with me for doing so, he just did not credit me on many, many really great songs that we wrote. Brian and I wrote together. Brian actually called me during the beginning of the lawsuit that I had to file to get my credit that I justly deserved. And he tried to rectify it, but at the time he called me, he was under what's called a conservatorship because he was, he'd been going through some emotional ups and downs, and he was not. The conservatorship meant that he couldn't make any decisions on anything having to do with money, among other things. So even though he wanted to resolve it and rectify it, he was not allowed by the attorney that my cousin Carl had put into place to be Brian's conservator. So that left me with having no other alternative than to go to court. So it wasn't so much against Brian, but against the conservatorship, because I knew Brian wanted to resolve the issue. And whenever I had talked to Brian, when I didn't see my name on I Get Around, for instance, and I came up with round, round, get around, I get around, and I'm getting bugged driving up and down the same old strip. I got to find a new place where the kids are hip. Well, I wrote all those words. So, and came up with the hook. And he came up with I get around from town to town. I'm a real cool head. I'm making real good bread. He came up with that part, and then I wrote the words and came up with the round, round, get around hook. But my name wasn't and credited on the 45 single that came out on Capitol Records at that time, along with Help Me Rhonda and several other songs.
Right.
But at any rate, so whenever I asked Brian about it, he said, "Oh, my dad fucked up." Huh. Yeah, but see, when his dad died after selling Sea of Tunes in the late 60s, died about 3 years later, Brian could have rectified it, but he didn't because he was still mentally in not a great place.
Right.
So, understanding Brian's mental and emotional and even physical challenges, I mean, I knew that he wanted to resolve them. I knew that he was well aware. In fact, even in court, he said that sounds like Mike when he when he was asked certain questions about lyrics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the case turned out primarily positive for me, and I did get the credit for many of the songs. And then years later, after that case, the songs revert, meaning the publishing comes back to the writer after like 50 some odd years.
Okay.
So yeah, so the majority of the hits were incorporated in that resolution, in that court case. But it was a drag to have to go to court to, drag for him, drag for me. But he was not in control of his life at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's been a long time coming to have the recognition for being, the lyricist that I am with the Beach Boys. And so I think it's probably the most significant award that I could have. Many awards are, a nice thing and perhaps look good on your mantle place or something wherever you put them in your home, and they might be good for your ego and stuff. But this, the Songwriters Hall of Fame induction is, I think, absolutely the most significant award that that I've been that I've received.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the first thing that stood out to me is when I saw that you were getting inducted. I went back and remembered that Brian had been inducted in the year 2000. It's 25 years later, but it seems perfectly suited to me that you're joining your cousin in this Hall of Fame because the two of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I wanted to talk songwriting in general. So I wanted to ask you a few outside the box questions here. What is your favorite song written by another artist?
Wow. I think that Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On" is a pretty significant song because it was written at the time when the Vietnam War was going on. And he said, "War is not the answer." And in my song, "Make Love Not War," I said, "War is not the answer." I distinctly heard him say, "Yet the same old's happening today." So I think from the standpoint of, the history of humanity for the last several thousand years has been the history of war and genocide and just terrible things. And more recently, the Ukraine war has gotten most of the print, but there's all kinds of horrible things going on in Africa and Asia. I mean, there are over 100 million people displaced at this moment in time on the planet. Over 100 million. That's a lot of folks. And so I think what's going on was a harbinger of what many years later I came up with, "Make Love Not War," what in the world is all the fighting for? Give peace a chance. The earth could use an evolutionary advance. And Maharishi, in Rishikesh, he was lecturing and saying that if enough people meditated, there could be world peace. So I mean, Ringo left after like a week or so in India, and he didn't like the food, they say, but also his wife was pregnant. And then George, Paul, and John stayed, but John couldn't wait to get with Yoko, and George was more into. I mean, he was into the Hare Krishna thing as well as Maharishi. In fact, when he was not well, he came and visited with Maharishi, and I understood that I'm told that he was very told Maharishi how much he loved him and all that kind of stuff. And Paul was really more interested in Apple Records than anything else. So I think there was a missed opportunity there. And in my case, I love the meditation and I love what the potential for peace meant. But then my cousin Dennis couldn't get off the alcohol and the heroin and the other things. And Carl had his issues for a while, but he was able to get up off that stuff. But still, Dennis died in '83. Carl died 26 years ago, and Brian had his challenges all along since the late '60s. And so I don't know. I think to me, the most important thing to me is world peace. That's it. I mean, we've done thousands of shows and we've created positivity and happiness through our music. And a lot of people have gotten uplifted by it, including ourselves. It's just a wonderful thing to do those songs with all the harmonies and the positivity. And I think our music has transcended generations. It's transcended borders and boundaries and racial and ethnic and religious boundaries as well. And there are so many examples that I could cite. Like, for instance, Prince Bandar, who was the royal family in Saudi Arabia, was the ambassador to the United States in the '80s. And I met him in his office in Washington. He said, "Mike, I'm a Beach Boys fan. I played your cassette in my Austin Healey when I was going to school in England." And so he's a very important guy in Saudi Arabia in the royal family, and is until this day. And his daughter, Rima Saud, I guess it is, she's the current ambassador of the United States from Saudi. So the point being that our music has reached around the world. We've had fan letters from Russia, fan letters from China. Iranian people used to play our music. We've had chart records all around the world, including, Israel, all over Europe, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. It's been an amazing experience to see and hear of the effect that our music has had. So many people have actually learned English by listening to our records, as well as the Beatles, as well as others. People have learned English from listening to American music. So it's great to be counted as one of the most significant musical artists from America. It's a total blessing to be able to do what we do. And I don't think a lot of people understand that the Beach Boys were two groups. One was the recording group, which we were all a part of, and one was the touring group, which when Brian left the touring group in late 1964, Glenn Campbell filled in for a few months before Bruce Johnston filled in for Glenn, and Bruce, the first song he sang was California Girls in 1965. So there have been two groups all these years, the recording group, of which Brian was extremely significant member of, and we all were part of. So, so anyway, I think people kind of lump they say the Beach Boys, but they don't quite understand that there were two groups, the recording group and the touring group. And the touring group, of which I've been a part of since the inception of the group, is something I've always taken a hand in. I would go to the William Morris Agency a couple of days a week if we were home and work with a promoter. His name was Irving Granz, and we did so many great concerts together with so many great opening acts. I mean, 100 opening acts at least. And Billy Joel was an opening act at one time, and
Mm-hmm.
the Buffalo Springfield, which Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young sprang out of that. So just amazing artists. Somebody last year, a friend of ours that's in the radio business, he calculated how many how many concerts I've done over the years, and I think it's around 6,000 or so. So that's a pretty significant achievement there as well.
Sure.
But I don't know if there's any award for that, but my reward for that is seeing on a nightly basis when we're on tour, seeing the effect that our music has on people of all ages. In fact, we were in Key West, Florida, about a month ago, and there's an amphitheater there, and there's a 10-year-old girl on her father's shoulders who'd made up some little posters and with her writing about the Beach Boys and stuff. And she's 10 years old, but it was her birthday and she wanted to go see the Beach Boys. So we signed her little posters that she drew up and gave it back to her, got it back to her, and her mom cried because it meant so much to her daughter. So that's pretty miraculous that in 2025, a 10-year-old girl wants to go to see the Beach Boys. It tells you a lot about the power of the music. We were a bunch of young guys just starting out in Southern California, loving music, loving harmonizing, loving the Everly Brothers, the doo-wop songs of the day, and Chuck Berry, of course, and the Four Freshmen, which those four-part harmonies that they did, that we learned a few of their songs, really was our trademark because we applied our four-part harmony to our rock tempos, whether it be slow, medium, or fast. And so that sound distinguishes the Beach Boys from so many other groups. I mean, they're great groups with great lead singers, and some can harmonize, maybe 2-3 parts. But I don't know of any other four-part harmony rock groups. So that was the Beach Boys' signature characteristic, I believe. And, we were always about blending perfectly. And in the Pet Sounds box set, where it had just the tracks, the musical tracks, and just the vocals on the CD, on 2 or 3 CDs, and then of course the album itself, Pet Sounds. It's literally amazing, both the musical tracks as well as the vocals. It just shows how perfect the harmonies were. And that's when I started calling Brian Dog Ears, and he was the Stalin of the studio at the time. We must have done one part of, wouldn't it be nice, 20, 25 times, something like that, to make it perfect. And I thought it was perfect. And then Brian said, "We'll do it again." And that's when I called him dog ears because he could hear something that ordinary human beings couldn't. But
Yeah.
it worked out. I mean, his obsession with those harmonies and our ability to harmonize beautifully together is totally the distinctive thing I think about the Beach Boys, in addition to which our subject matter. We were the first people to sing literally about the sport of surfing. There were other what they called surf bands and stuff, but they were instrumental primarily. So in retrospect, there's far more for me to be grateful for and have gratitude for and feel blessed about than there is to be, you know, um, what upset about. I
Hmm.
mean, certainly when your uncle doesn't treat you right and steals from you, and your cousin is incapable of rectifying it because of his mental and emotional issues, it's not fun. It's not great at all. It's anything but. But that doesn't mean that I don't have the love for the music and the love for like my cousins or cousins, even though they might have experienced, you know, problems and issues that weren't any fun to deal with. But because thankfully because of meditation, because which I learned from Maharishi, Transcendental Meditation in December of '67 in Paris. I've been doing that ever since. And that's given me the ability to deal with the negative issues, but also not just survive, but thrive through the daily practice of my meditation. And
Hmm.
so I have more to be thankful for than to be, you know, I don't dwell on the negativity of the past other than give a factual recounting of it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, you and Brian co-wrote the motherlode of the Beach Boys' most popular hit songs. When you reflect on those formative years, what did you admire most about Brian's approach to songwriting?
Well, his ability was to go to the piano and he could break down the four freshmen's parts. And he would sing the high part, I would sing the low part, and then Al and Carl would sing the parts in between. But that ability to break down those four freshmen incredible harmonies was pretty amazing. But that ability showed up in the the intro, the opening bar of or bars of "When I Grow Up to Be a Man." Just an incredible harmonic thing that is just so unique. And so many songs had that imprint of Brian's uncanny ability to structure chord progressions and the harmonies beautifully, and to work with the musicians, the Wrecking Crew, some of the best musicians in the world, and that happen to live in the LA area and recorded in all those recording studios in Hollywood, and played on dozens of enormous hit records. Um, but Brian was a master in the studio, spontaneously dealing out parts and hearing stuff in his mind that he wanted to hear from the musicians, those tracks. Probably the most interesting being Good Vibrations. And he did Good Vibrations in several different studios. And the composite was finally done. And that's when I wrote dictated the words to my ex-wife Suzanne, who's the mother of Haley and Christian, who Christian is now singing with us. But I dictated the poem, there was the Vietnam War going on. There was integration problems. There was all kinds of issues in the world, as there always have been. And I wanted to accentuate the positive. I wanted to do this good vibrations. I wanted to do this poem about a girl who's into peace and love and nature and all good things. And so I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me excitations. I came up with that part to paraphrase the bass line that was done by Carol Kay, who was the bass player with that for the most part for that Wrecking Crew.
Yeah.
And Hal Blaine was the drummer. He was an amazing guy. And the beauty of that was because there were two groups, Carl and I and Dennis and Al and other people would be on tour. Like, for instance, with the Penn Sounds album, we were on tour in Japan and came back to these incredible tracks that Brian had done, including Sloop John B, which was brought to Brian's awareness by Alan Jardine, because he was a big Kingston Trio fan, and so was I. So it worked really well to have the live group and the recording group, but it was in the 60s. It was definitely, Brian was at his peak in the Pet Sounds in the Smile era. Now the Smile era I wasn't involved with the songwriting there, but the tracks were great. But somebody else was writing the lyrics, and I thought I came up with the term acid alliteration, meaning LSD. So, and Brian freaked out and shelved the album because he thought that the fire tapes, he did the elements, earth, wind, water, and fire, and he thought that he had caused a fire in the area because of doing the song Fire. So, I mean, that was a little bit of extra sensitivity due to the influence of LSD. So there's been really periods of time where it was very challenging to deal with that kind of thing. But by and large, I mean, there's so much success and positivity. I mean, Good Vibrations went to number one in 1966, and we were voted the number one group in Great Britain, number two being the Beatles. That's pretty significant because nobody's more successful and popular, and nobody sold more records than the Beatles at that period of time. And so, at any rate, that I think to be recognized, the Songwriters Hall of Fame is really a nice culmination of things. It really is. It's starting a new era for me. I mean, after that, and after the induction in June 12th, we're doing the Capitol Fourth again in Washington, D.C. And then we're going to Europe. And next year will be the 250th anniversary of the USA. And I think we'll play a decent part in the celebration, as we once did from July 4th in those enormous concerts in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. in the 80s.
Hello, everybody. This is John Stamos, and I've been reading Endless Summer Quarterly for over 30 years. Damn, I'm getting old. Well, it's the best. You should read it, too. Peace and love. Peace and love.
Hi, everyone. This is Brian Wilson, and I wanted to let everyone know about Endless Summer Quarterly. It's a great magazine. Subscribe today.